Good morning, folks. Let's call the Town of South Kingstown Building Committee meeting to order June 4th at 8:01. We will do our roll call. Mark Russo, welcome.
Thank you, and here.
Brian Sylvia.
Here.
Michael Pedraza. Luke Murray.
Here.
Kate Massanim here. Terry Lynch.
Here.
And Bob Littlefield.
Here.
Just got a text from Chippy's on his way.
Okay, great, thank you. And we have Gil Bain and Left Field, and you're also repping Phil Conti from Studio Jade.
Yes.
Too many names.
Too many people, yes.
All right, so our first order of business, I don't recall receiving public correspondence. You did?
We did receive some correspondence from an abutter on Oak Street regarding concerns about vibration as we were doing some work compacting for the primary duct bank and some new utility poles. We did also, the building committee did receive an email correspondence from Maggie Martin regarding concerns of noise as well.
Perfect, thank you. And yes, the vibratory monitoring is on our agenda, so I did know that, so thank you. All right, so, but we will move on to new business discussion, action, recommendation for approval of change order task force requests. Kate.
If we could wait for Chip, he's got a lot of input and great insight into some of these changes. Tell him to step on it.
So that, yeah, that's fine. We can just move on then to discussion update, the new South Kingstown High School project updates. And including in that will be also item C, solar ready discussions around the project.
Great, give me one moment. Let me pull up our presentation. All right, gotta skip ahead a few pages. All right, so as we're looking at solar panels, we wanted to bring in front of the building committee a plan of action regarding the consideration and implementation of a solar array for the new South Kingstown High School. This has been discussed for probably the last year or so as a consideration as part of a sustainable feature on the building. The building has always been designed to be solar ready, meaning that it's ready to receive solar panels in the future. With the upcoming expiration of some solar incentives, we want to expedite the conversation about solar to be able to capitalize on some of those incentives. So we've had some conversations with a consultant in town from Newport Renewables, their local South Kingstown company, who has been doing some advising for us on the potential layouts for solar, potential costs for solar, and then giving us some more insight into the incentive programs. So in a nutshell, the 30% federal incentive for solar array is expiring. You have to have your system up and ready and operational by the end of 2027. That is a year and a half from now. However, for anybody that's done solar on their own homes, one of the largest weighting components that we have on this project is going to be the interconnection from Rhode Island Energy. So, backing into our time frame, we have substantial completion at the end of July, where Gilbane will turn the building over to us, as well as all of the warranties that are associated with the building. We can do a lot of pre-work to get the solar panels ready. Best case scenario, they start work at the beginning of August, roughly a month for installation. And then they are seeing 4 to 5 months from Rhode Island Energy for the interconnection sign off. That puts us at risk for being able to have these systems operational for the end of 2027. We can have the panels on the building. It's waiting for Rhode Island Energy. So to mitigate that risk, there is an option for something called safe harboring the project. So if we buy 5% of the materials associated with the project, then we secure our spot in line, and we're not subject to that end of 2027 deadline because we've already started the procurement process. So that is something that needs to happen in the next month or so to safe harbor us. At sometime in the beginning to mid-July is when we need to do that. So what we're going to be presenting to Town Council is a recommendation to move forward with master purchase agreement to procure that 5%. There are several solar vendors that are on their master purchase agreement. We'll be looking to get quotes from Newport Renewables for the 5%. Right now, their recommendation would be for the power optimizer. It is a component of the building that is universal. If we do not continue forward with Newport Renewables, it is something that we can use with a different vendor. If the town chooses to not move forward with solar in its entirety, it is something we could potentially sell back as well. So this is an early procurement, roughly $75,000 that we would be investing in the securement of that reimbursement. These are some slides Phil pulled together. I'll see what we've got in here that I didn't touch on already. State of Rhode Island also has a $75,000 one-time payment. So here are some of the projections for the solar array that has been proposed by Newport Renewables. So the navy blue is assumed energy consumption that we received from the electrical engineer, and then green would be the solar production. So we're offsetting, looks like about 30 to 50% of the electricity use of the building. The incentives reduce our payback period to less than 10 years. Without the incentives, the payback period is over 15 years. And then the life cycle of the system as a whole is 25 years. So the proposed system is 750 panels, 450 kilowatts. The estimated cost of the system is about $1.5 million. The incentives are estimated around $500,000. So again, that payback period is looking at less than 10 years. That's okay. All right. Just to note, this is not part of our GMP. As we note, this is not currently included in the cost. This is something we would fund from the owner's contingency. As we'll talk about with the change order task force, we're at about $6.4 million with our remaining balance for owner's contingency. So we're in a really healthy place financially. Our building is well out of the ground, so some of the riskiest parts for new construction are behind us. Again, risk associated with the demolition still exists, but to a smaller scale. So we are not at this point recommending subcontracting this under Gilbane. This would be an owner procured service. Again, why we'd be looking forward with moving forward with the safe harboring off of the master purchase agreement. All right. After safe harboring, we would then issue an RFP for the complete installation. So we would go through the public procurement process for the complete installation of the system. All right. We discussed some of those risks. All right. Town Council elected to proceed with a complete solar installation. The federal government would default on the reimbursement. Production may be lower. Payback may be greater than 10 years, and utility offsets may be less than anticipated. Those are some of the potential risks that come with solar. For, again, anybody that's had it on their own homes, you know that Sometimes it produces a little bit less than they told you it would. It really obviously is weather dependent. And the fluctuation of utility usage is going to be dependent as well. So as we talked about, some of our next steps are going to be finalizing those safe harbor costs. We're going to be getting those proposals off of the master purchase agreement, presenting to town council for approval on June 22nd, developing an RFP for the complete solar installation, and looking for town council approval of that RFP and the full system by the fall of this year.
So today we would be looking to recommend that they do this, or are we holding off on that and they're going to, you're going to present Monday to give them the information and then they can decide if they want us to proceed? And then that decision, Luke, would happen on the 22nd? Or, because it seems to me like this is not us discussion.
No, this is
right?
informational.
This is fully, if town council wants to move forward with this, because this is independent of, in my opinion, of where we've been doing.
I mean, we'd be looking to utilize owner's contingencies, so it's very much a project-based cost.
But they're making this choice, we are not.
So we're not asking for a formal motion. We're looking for kind of the green light to move forward with procuring a price for the master purchase agreement for safe harboring, and identifying that is the direction they want to go before we go ahead and get a quote. The next step will be providing them that quote, having them approve that quote off the master purchase agreement.
Yeah, so I would recommend we recommend that, what you just said, is the safe harboring.
Yes.
To hold our position, no more. The council needs to decide two things. One, do they want to pull the, if they have an inkling that they want to pull the trigger, they need to act now to secure the incentive. They could hold on the final decision, although I would sense that they're probably going to have this discussion and decide whether they want to move forward with the whole project or not. But I do think we should weigh in, because there's two things. Financially, we have the contingencies, and I think we're in charge of sort of making recommendations based on change orders and whatnot. Yeah. The second thing is, as a whole, the building project. This is part of the building project, and we're responsible to provide a recommendation to the council.
I agree, but this is a big change, because it started out with solar ready, now it's solar. So, I mean, I'm all for it. I have solar panels on my house. The delay with Rhode Island Energy is real and is very frustrating, but that's just part of the process. But, and again, I would recommend that, recommend to the town council that we think, clearly that it should move forward with whatever, but it's on them more so than us.
And we can simply recommend that it be brought up for consideration by the council. That's it. We don't have to say any more than that. Whether we're for it or against it, we can be somewhat neutral. It's not a critical component of the project. So, I do have a couple of questions. Yep, go ahead, Mark.
Just one quick question. The building, as far as utility costs, is it mainly electric? So we could sell it better that way, that our utility costs would just go cut by 30% at a minimum, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that while the design team has done a great job of designing an incredibly efficient building envelope, we are introducing air conditioning to this building. The utility costs will be higher than they are currently, or the electricity costs will be.
So that is actually related to the question I had. So you didn't get any specifics on the payback, but that matters, right? The assumptions matter. You have all the backup on that we can attach?
We have the full study that talks about the payback. Again, it really is dependent on the actual production and the actual consumption. So it really is ballparking where we think we're going to be, but I do have those numbers as part of the study that Newport Renewables pulled together for us.
I think it's just important that the public and the council is able to see the backup, because the payback's based on assumptions. Interest rates, production, consumption, all of that. What are our assumptions? I just don't want to, I want to make sure that it's conservative, right?
Yes.
Because we don't want to have egg on our faces 10 years from now or
Well,
15 years.
yes, and I also want to just caution, this is an estimate. We are going to bid out the project, so that payback will need to be recalculated once we understand the actual cost of the system. This is an estimate that's been provided for what the system could cost, but we're going to publicly bid this out, so we have to understand the bids that will be received and then recalculate that. So I don't want to commit to a formal payback until after we've gone through that process.
And was
Right
it
now,
net-
we're projecting and estimating what these costs could be.
Was it net metered or is it selling back? Or
Currently,
could
net
be both?
metering. Net metering is the current proposal.
Just, the only thing with net metering, we have, and we just had this discussion, we have more credits, with paying the solar companies more than we have in credits right now for the town. So, I'm looking at a carport right now project that's potential for a highway, and I was flat out, I want to sell it back to the grid. So that may be an option to pay off, like we could apply that to the bond to pay off the system as opposed to, because there's some intricacies of offsetting the net metering too. That doesn't help us pay off the debt, right? That helps set the utility bill, which is great for the operating budget, but it doesn't help us pay off the system as
No,
well.
it
So
is.
I think that's something we're going to have to discuss.
It's very much two different funds. We are looking to offset operational costs for the building, right? And we understand that it's not the school department that's paying for this, it is through the town and through the bond. So it's really in two different buckets, so that payoff life cycle is a little bit unusual or unique in that way. We are not, at this point, we are not proposing selling back energy with the current models that we're showing. We are also not looking to exceed production versus consumption. We are not looking to we are not estimating overproducing energy on this building to be able to sell back. We are just looking to reduce the utility costs at this point.
Yeah, well, you can do a direct sell back, you don't have to
Yes.
net meter. So,
Yes, yes.
All right, so that's fine, we don't have to make that decision now, but I think the council needs to stand, that's gonna be a decision that's gonna have to be made as part of this. And then, what was my last thing? The one thing I never brought up before, but we're already putting infrastructure in the school for solar. So to secure that credit, we need to have 5% of the total cost of the system. Could that be counted, it's under our current contract, could that be counted towards the system as opposed to buying a separate component?
We can look into it. Right now, it is structural, it's pathways and conduit, it's space within our electrical room, it's some modifications in the electrical room, so
I just don't think it
Wait,
occurred to
I can
us
ask.
because on a
I can
normal
ask.
project, you'd be buying a solar system on an existing roof.
Yes.
We're building the whole system now, like the infrastructure. So before we go out and buy something else that, is sitting in a yard, we may want to just think about, or at least ask the question, can we count what we already have on the contract?
yeah, let's see if we can quantify it. That's a great idea.
All right, that's all I got.
Anyone else?
Just one last question, sorry. You said the state of Rhode Island is a $75,000, is that an incentive or is that a charge to the state?
That would be an incentive, that would be a payback to the program.
And don't apologize for asking questions. I love it. Usually nobody says anything, so it's always me talking, and Luke, and Chip. All right. So that's just the solar component. And are you ready? Go ahead.
Make a motion?
Yep.
I'll make a motion to make a recommendation for the consideration of the installation of a solar array on the proposed high school.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. So that will take place on June 8th. Monday. Perfect. Thank you. You can go ahead.
Do we want to go back to change order task force now that we got Chip?
There's a duck in the hall. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we did meet with the change order task force last week to discuss a few elective changes that we would look to propose to both building committee and to town council for some adjustments. These adjustments came off of the furniture design meeting with the faculty and with Dr. Beguer, looking at ways to be more efficient, future-proofing the building, and then just ultimately identifying some additional needs that we should consider here. So we did meet last week. The change order task force has recommended unanimously to move forward with all of the changes that have been proposed. The list was initially longer than we are proposing. We did meet with Dr. McGair and comb through some of those to really identify what is truly a need or best practice versus what is a wish and desire. We want to be careful to not reinvent the wheel at each time we revisit some of these areas of infrastructure. So we don't want to redesign the building as we're in construction, but we do feel that at this point, a lot of these changes are significantly cheaper to make now and do provide some future proofing for the project than if we were to have to make them later. But Chip, I'll let you kind of walk through each of them like you did with the task force, and talk through some of those changes. I'm happy to enlarge anything if you need
So I'll
to.
go a little quicker through them because we wound up spending close to an hour,
Yeah.
but it was worth the time. So the first item really has to do with flexibility, and it's the ability to house more staff in a space without it being uncomfortable for staff, but giving a quiet space for people to put their stuff down, as well as be able to work quietly when they need to. That was the first one. The second one is that what we as we were seeing how the building will function, we started to think about where will students be able to make copies. And so two of the places that they do that now are the library as well as the guidance office. So this is remedying that, so putting us in a spot where kids can easily just walk in under supervision, print when they need to, and then walk out and not. So that's what the second one is.
All right, and that first cost is $2,385, and the second cost for the printer and guidance is $2,973.
Okay, again, it's flexibility in the athletic director's office. Doesn't mean we have to put the assistant to the athletic director in there, but we'd have the ability to have two people in that office, which would be more complicated down the road. So. Because also one of the things I want to think about is, like, we've seen a trend recently of more stability at the high school in terms of student population. Hopefully that continues, but at some point it may even wind up increasing, and if you start increasing, then you may have to look at additional staff. And so thinking about places where we could easily fit more staff without it being awkward. So that's what the reason for that request was. Vending machines, when we were designing the cafeteria, we didn't really think about this part. And while we don't own the vending machines, we do need a space for them. And we've spent a lot of time thinking about how to best design this cafeteria, and having vending machines in there as opposed to down the hall is going to enable us to better supervise that space. So there is a little bit more work to get that, to have space for those and the electricity for those, but that was the reason behind this request. So this is for storage. So ensuring that we have an easy place to access and store guitars out of the way, so we have as much floor space as possible. And the whiteboard was deemed not really necessary, so it's a pretty easy swap out there. Okay, so we just forgot to include lockers for our custodial staff, and so this would put lockers for them when they walk in the door. So that's just a thing that needed to be improved. Same with tackboard and whiteboard for them to be able to write their tasks. So these were just not major things that we forgot, but when we were working with custodial staff on how their space would function, it was like, well, we don't have this or this, and all seemed like reasonable requests for them to be able to best do their jobs. Okay, so the media center, originally, if you're looking at this drawing, in the back upper right is where the student quieter spaces were. And so the location of the library media specialist station was fine where it was, but now they would be around the corner, and so it's not ideal for supervision. So the request here is to do two things. One, put the student copier where the library media specialist desk is right there, and then move the library media specialist desk more to the middle for better supervision. So there's some data ports that need to go as a result of that. So those are those two, I believe, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so we have one large storage room for art, which initially sounded great, but then you realize that you've got very dusty items on the left when you're working with clay, and your regular painting and colored pencils and so forth, and excuse my crude understanding of exactly all their supplies, but on the right-hand side, well, if we don't want to keep throwing supplies away, we really need a wall to separate the two so that the dust is not getting into those supplies. So that's the reason for this request.
This one's a little bit larger at just shy of 23,000, and that does include some modifications to our mechanical system, sprinkler system, lighting systems, since that wall is going to go all the way up to the ceiling. We did also have some discussions regarding fire separation. This wall, highlighted in red, is not indicated as a fire separation, but the entirety of the space is separated.
So this really just comes down to thinking about the need to preserve supplies so that we're not throwing things out because dust is kicking around.
So because the kiln is already in that space, was that already taken into account in terms of a heat source? And so the fireproofing of that entire room, and if by cutting it in half, the system that we have for suppression, whether it be suppression or monitoring, is that able to be scaled back, commensurate with the size of the room being scaled back? That's going to be ultimately vulnerable to a heat source of the kiln?
No, so the fire separation, firewalls and sprinklers, when we look at life safety, it is really to slow the progression of the fire to allow people to get out. By adding that fire separation between those two spaces, really the only benefit would be slowing down the destruction of the materials on the other end, which really isn't the intention of the fire separation there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so this is functionality, and so as we're looking at the allied health space, I certainly hope that the allied health CT program continues on strongly, but in the event that it didn't, or in the event of increased number of students that that come in the building, we would want to use this space more flexibly, and so the thinking is that we set it up more like a biology lab so that it can be used for that purpose. And so the addition here would be the electric reels that come down to plug in. So this is just being able to use this space for more than just allied health is really what the goal here is with that.
And the cost for these is a little under $30,000.
Okay, so when they built and again, it's the same type of thing here. I love that we have a farm tech program, that it's wonderful, but for whatever reason, when we were designing this, it wound up installing the pharmacy like set up into the floor, which in the event that we didn't run this, like getting that out of there would now cost us a lot more money, and it's potentially going to be unsightly to do that. So the idea here is changing the floor so it's like your typical floor, and putting everything more mobile for the farm tech. So that's the idea with that one. And then for the physics lab, it's same thing, flexibility. So if we can move the desks easily out of the way, you can do more things in that room and then easily get them back. That's a very small one, but it's still the reason for it. And we talked about on the previous one that there may be some reductions because of things we don't have to do. For example, we may be able to now take the modules for the pharmacy in our current building over and use those. And those were designed by construction tech, so there is certainly like a nice feature there, and those are bolted in, but easy enough to move. So that's something that we may be able to actually cut down the cost of that change. Okay, so this one is the, okay. So when we designed the building, the anatomy physiology lab, we did not have an animatage table. So an animatage table is basically an anatomy table, and it's unbelievable. It's very large, but it allows kids to see the human body in extreme detail. It's awesome. It was written by, we got it through a Champlain grant. It's about $75,000 grant that we got for that. It's really neat that we have it, but it wouldn't fit in this room. So working with the teacher, we came up with an idea of getting rid of the fixed teacher station, moving to a mobile teacher station, and putting the animatage table where the teacher station was. So basically, without having to go to a different space or really reconfigure the space, we were able to find a good spot for that, so that it can be more integrated into the program. And then, yeah, I think that was. Oh, and then the glass insert. What's that?
And that's a savings, though?
Yes.
It is a savings.
Yep. And then the glass insert part, we have an actual human skeleton that was donated many years ago to South Kingstown High School, and so we don't want the kids touching it, but so the glass panel would allow the kids to see into it without actually touching it. So it's just designing the room a little bit smarter so that we can preserve what we have.
So eliminating that teacher station to be able to fit the animatage table is a credit of $4,090. So all in, if we were to accept all of the changes, we'd be looking at a rough order of magnitude $98,000 for everything that we've discussed today. Again, the change order task force did unanimously approve all of the recommendations that Dr. McGarrett just reviewed.
And we're lucky enough to have Councilmember Marin with us on that vote. So it really came down to these we saw as functionality, flexibility, and future ready.
Yes.
That's really what the core of this whole thing was. And a lot of these probably would have been included at the start had we gotten down to the design level we are now, which when you start getting to this level, things come up.
Yes.
So we didn't feel like this was anything that was like a want. This is more of needs.
Yes, I would agree.
Does anybody have any questions for Chip or Luke on these?
No, I think this is an example of, as the project gets closer to completion, people are envisioning use and they're picturing themselves actually working in this facility, and things become clearer. These are details that a year ago no one would have thought of, but now it's becoming more real. Now they're envisioning themselves working there, and they've got a clearer picture of what it is that they need, not want.
Also, from a kind of school committee perspective, what I like is we get to get some really insight into what's going on in our classrooms. Like knowing about the Armitage table, like I wouldn't know what that is. But now I'm like, that's really a pretty cool thing that we offer our students and community. The pharmacy tech, well, you understand that that's happening, but to be able to talk about it, and then the grant work that has gone into making sure, or the camaraderie between the CTE programs, like in order to make these spaces work, it's also highlights that at the same time as making sure we're giving our programs what they need. So I appreciate you guys fleshing that out. So does anybody else have any comments, questions, concerns? So we'll need a recommendation for approval. So we make a recommendation to the town council for approval of the change order task force requests. If someone wants to make that motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the change order task force.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, then, that's going in front of the town council on Monday, June 8th.
I think that has been moved to the 22nd.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. So that will bring us, excuse me, to the discussion action around continuing vibratory monitoring for the South Kingstown High School project for this next phase that we're navigating. We had discussed based on the information that was shared about I believe it was Oak Street household. We discussed it at our planning meeting on Monday to bring it to this table to talk about. We've done vibratory monitoring in the past, and this is really about continuing that for this pocket of work that Gilbane's going to be taking place of. So if you guys want to talk about it in more eloquent detail than I just did, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah, so we have some additional vibratory compaction work that's upcoming on our project schedule, where the new faculty parking lot's going to be, currently where the contractors are parking. It's closest to Branch Street. That area is going to receive some additional site work. So some of the levels of vibratory compaction are going to be elevated for, I think, roughly 2 weeks. While they perform that work, they have to raise the grade up, and at each lift, they need to compact it and test it to make sure that it's stable before they continue elevating the grade. So the additional vibratory monitoring would be $2,500 a week. Originally, they had told us it would be a minimum of 8 weeks. Laura Wilson from Gilbane was able to negotiate them down to 4 weeks, as we're looking at a 2-week period. So that would be a total of $10,000 that we'd be looking to spend. The allowance that we had held $40,000 for vibration monitoring. At this point, that allowance has been exceeded, so we'd be looking to fund this from either another allowance source or potentially owner's contingency. These have not been reviewed with change order task force. We'd be looking at utilizing some funds to be able to move this forward quickly in order to get the monitoring on site when we need it. The additional item that I included on here is surveillance cameras. This was a conversation once the lighting turned off. There was some questions whether or not there were people that were entering the project site and potentially climbing into the structure. Based off of the tragedy that we've experienced in the community, I think it is even more important to go forward with additional surveillance if somebody is entering our project site, that we are aware of it. So that is a cost of $2,000 a month. And I put 16 months as just a general duration as we go through closing out the building, but and turning the building over, but we can modify that duration. I just wanted to bring that up also for consideration as we're talking about just additional levels of oversight on our project.
So let's take them one at a time. So the vibration monitoring, I think, is super important, so that we have the data that backs up what we're doing, understanding that the current levels of vibration, our neighbors specifically around Branch Street, is high. And while the monitoring doesn't show that, it's what the people are actually experiencing. But it is good to have the data to back up where we are at actually versus what I'm experiencing as a homeowner, right? So does anybody else have any thoughts or concerns around vibration monitoring for our neighbors?
We did have this discussion at the OAC meeting. I'm in favor of it. We've already done quite a bit of vibration monitoring at an expensive cost. This would probably be the last, this is a question, probably the last time we'd have to have this monitoring.
Yeah, if we want to have it during
Demolition.
demolition, we would re-engage them.
But we've spent a significant amount of cost on construction surveys, vibration monitoring to this day, and to cover the town's liability long-term if we were sued on something or there was an insurance claim, I think it's prudent to make the investment.
Because that is the action item that is on our agenda, if we could make, again, is this do we have to take action, or is that just something that they?
Yeah, I think
We're going to pull these from allowance dollars. So as far as the ordinance for the change order task force or building committee goes, allowance draws are within the overall contract that's already been approved from Gilbane. So we don't need an additional approval formally to utilize the funds. We just want to discuss whether or not you guys want to move forward with these scopes of work.
So I'll just make a motion that we we approve the implementation of vibration monitoring for the next 4 weeks.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, great. As far as the surveillance cameras,
Audible gasp. I'm not in favor of this. There's a couple reasons. One is I'm going through a camera policy with the town right now of just cameras in general and the sort of the big brother aspect of this. At $2,000 a month, if Gilbane wants at their cost to secure their access, we can their assets, we can have that discussion if they feel it's needed as far as a policy. But from a town aspect, they own the site. If somebody goes into that fence, they own the issue. I'm not saying, and it's also, surveillance is after the fact. We don't actively surveil. So if something happens, it's great to have the video, but that's part of an investigation after the fact. I don't know what's installed for cameras on the school property now, but even from a cost aspect, I would say, well, we should be looking at our own cameras and saying, could we do something to surveil the perimeter of the site? But I just, there's multiple avenues of here where I just see issue, and we haven't had an issue to this point. There's many a construction site that I've worked on, and you've probably worked on, that has no cameras. Things sometimes get damaged. People go on the site, they crack a window, they do things. I don't think, and Gilbane can speak to this, that we've had that to date. So unless there's some reason.
So to date, we have not had an actual occurrence of anything being damaged or anything missing. When we just had that big storm that just blew through with the winds, there was an instance where one of the gang boxes was tipped over. And one other thing had been amiss as well. Could certainly be attributable to the wind. In fact, that's kind of probably what I think, personally, if I had to make a judgment call. I think the wind blew through and just tipped the thing over. But there was that instance that happened. Other than that, there has been 0 instances. We have heard from one of the neighbors that they hear noises there at night. But again, I've been there at night during concrete pours and whatnot, and you can hear noises through to the parking lot, and the kids definitely go to the parking lot at night. So in a nutshell, we don't have any evidence that anybody has been coming on. There's nothing missing. There's nothing damaged. There was just that one instance where things got tipped over, and that was right after that storm. So to your point, though, I mean, while it is that town's property, like within the fence from an insurance standpoint, right, it is Gilbane that's carrying all that insurance. So, we would want to reserve the right to maybe add cameras if we needed to in the future, if things come up and things are different than what we're seeing right now. Right now, we don't foresee needing it, but we do want to at least put it out there that if things do come up down the road, that we may need to put cameras in there. But to date, everything's been fine.
I just want to add something to Luke's point. There is a camera on the building now. It's a time-lapse camera. It's off the existing high school. I don't know if there's other cameras within the area that we can just reposition toward the site, just to cover, and that wouldn't be $2,000 a month.
So speaking with the IT group, because we asked them that very question, at the beginning of the project, before the building was there was full coverage everywhere. You could see every different direction across the field and whatnot. Now that the building is up, some of the cameras that are on Hazard and one maybe that's kind of off of the cafeteria don't necessarily pick anything up anymore just because of the obstructions that we now have. But there is one in the back that covers the student parking area that does give us that view from of the project site from that angle. But I want to say, a couple or more of the angles that we had in the beginning no longer probably exist, at least from seeing everything. But once we get enclosed, I mean, if somebody were to go in there, I mean, you're not going to pick them up on the camera anyways. You may maybe catch them coming in or coming out, but once they're in there, you're not going to see anything anyways because it's going to be enclosed probably. So
I would suggest we probably just put a pin in this for now, and then if something changes going forward, we can revisit the topic. As far as neighbors saying you can hear it, I agree with you. That noise could be, I've driven by at night, and they've been kids on the sidewalk next to the site, not in the site, but it's going to sound like it's dark, you don't know they're there, and then all of a sudden you see them. And then, of course, maybe it is also something we want to take note of, is that kids are in our parking lot in the middle of the night. We might want to monitor that. But again, I wouldn't want to drop this kind of money at this stage of the game unless there's a real concern and need for it. So,
Okay.
But we can keep it kind of asterisk off to the side if things change.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. Do you have anything else that you want to continue to update around the high school project?
We have a regular update and then just a brief update for Curtis Corner and a plan from Phil for the passageway through the new athletics program. All right, so I'll start with Curtis Corner. As we noted, abatement began about a month ago. We have control group 3, which is in process. You can see here in green, these are the areas that have been cleared and completed. Right now we're in area 3, starting in this section as we move along. Just some quick photos of the cleared hallway, cleared cafeteria. For anybody that was in here before and saw what it looked like, this is quite a bit different. Quite a change. So we are looking for demolition. We're trying to pinpoint a date with Bill Ray to when they want to start demolition. We do still need to get a permit from the town for demolition after we have air clearances in these areas. They cannot start demolition without that. That has been made very clear. So that is something that's probably coming up in the next 3 to 4 weeks. And we do have a letter that we'll be sending out to the abutters just to give them let them know and give them the opportunity to be able to contact us and give us their information. This is not as heavily populated of a site as our high school is, so we won't have quite the amount of abutters that we have on the high school site, but we still do want to be good and conscious neighbors to everyone around Curtis Corner. And then phase 3 of the athletic program update. I'm going to try and zoom in here a little bit. I'm not going to try and be Phil. Phil is not here, but I did want to give an opportunity for everybody to look at the latest layout. As far as circulation through the site, the last layout was really more focused on entrance into the site, circulation within the site, not necessarily full access through the site. So this is a modification, continuing with access off of Curtis Corner Road to be able to access some new parking areas directly adjacent to the field, roundabout in front of the tennis court areas, and then access back out onto Onion Drive.
To this, because
Yes.
I've been working with Phil on this. So when I saw the originally presented designs from, I don't know, about a month ago, I expressed some concerns, and I applaud Phil. Phil's always open to working with me on design concepts from the very beginning of the project. And I created a sketch quick, and I said, can you work on this? So the idea was, here's my issues. Sight lines from the existing entryway coming from Curtis Corner heading west, the first entranceway, is difficult to get out. So if you remember, the original design that Phil had presented had the bus sort of parking, everything accessed by that aisle. So the first concern was, I don't want to, I was concerned that we were creating a situation that currently exists. Is there's a curve there, difficult sightline issues. Second thing is we're eliminating any possibility on the previous designs to have recreation up front. So pickleball courts and things that we had committed, although not under the project, we had committed that there was going to be room for additional activities, future, as part of the larger park. And that's something the Rec Commission had brought up, and it's right adjacent to the bike path. On our earlier concepts, Onion was going to turn into kind of a secondary bike path to bypass the central lane. And on the previous designs, it was continuing to use Onion, which in my opinion was redundant because you don't have enough traffic flow to the site to have two roadways. There didn't seem to be any entrance approach to the stadium. I had mentioned, like, I want teams to come here and have the wow effect. Like, they come on a bus, they can get dropped off in front of the field house, and then part of the problem with the original design was they'd have to go back out onto the road to get back to the bus parking. And that to me just, it was redundant. You know, you don't need a separate aisle to get back. So they took a little bit, you know, I created some bubble diagrams and things, gave it to them. This is not, I think, perfect, but it's getting there to where I think, in my opinion, it's a better thought. So to the right-hand side of what you see would still be green field. We'd maintain a lot of the existing trees up front, but we create a new drive lane on the straightaway that has a better sight distance to the east and the west when you're pulling out. The idea would have a free right on the Curtis corner, and then obviously you have your left turn lane out. I know people sometimes are adverse. They see a rotary and they freak, especially after Warwick and they're going in throughout Rhode Island. But they do most of the time work, and especially trying to get flow out of a parking lot, it keeps the traffic moving. I would imagine it's rare that you're going to have the activities in the back dumping out in a large event at the same time as what would be on the athletic field. But it also creates some sense of entry, because that's the node. That's the place where the field house, that plaza could come into the rotary. And again, you could, with some tweaks to this design, have a bus drop-off and bus parking right there. So they'd come out around the circle, drop, and then come out and go. So we still would have a maintenance parking area. So you see it up in the upper right-hand corner. So that would be for, it could be buses, but shed storage, utility vehicles, things along those lines. But it's access through an internal aisle, so it simplifies the curb cuts. And then we have room for the pickleball courts. The one caveat to this is the tennis courts would have to be modified. They're in fine shape, they're not in great shape, I will say that. So it's not like they're brand new courts we'd be having to modify. I don't know what the cost difference is, and I didn't obligate anything because that's not my role. My role is to try to lend my experience and try to bring it to the committee. So we're still gonna have the other design option. What I asked Phil was, and Sam from Garofalo is, can you put some price data to both, and let's see what the comparison is, because this design actually simplifies, I think, a lot of the paving. There's a lot of redundant drive aisles and things that actually get taken out. So even though this is a main roadway concept, it may not come out as cost burdensome as some may think. So it's still in discussion. I think he's going to come back with cost data on kind of the both concept model, and then we can make decisions on the phase 3. Does anybody have any questions? All right.
The only thing I'll say about the Rotary is it's not like it's a main road. It's not like where it's suggesting putting this in Dale Collier Corner. So I think it's also good, yes, to keep traffic flowing, but also to slow traffic down, because when you see a road like that and knowing you have a lot of student drivers in the area, I'm just reflecting back to when I was 17. So you might want to take that at a high rate of speed. A rotary is going to slow you down naturally. So my only concern would be the cost, right? Moving the tennis court, adding that as a cost component, I think is a concern. But until we have numbers, then. Terry, how about, do you have any input or from your lens and experience?
No, we talked about a lot of this stuff too. I would say, I'm going to throw this out there, if the courts are going to cost us money, then I would get rid of the pickleball courts, but that's just me. Because I think those tennis courts would be more important.
Claire, I want to be clear. Those are just for representation only for the area. We would not be building tennis courts under this phase. So the idea is that the town would fund future pickleball courts there. And the tennis court would be under the project because the project is blowing that away. But no, the idea was that the Rec Commission wanted to have some flexibility up front. The last thing I'll point out is this keeps that green space, which is nice. It can be overflow parking, But I'm also thinking that if we had town events, you could put a big tent there and have the parking, like we could have any sort of a festival events, something there. So it does keep a fair amount. This actually has a lot of green space to it that's usable.
And the athletic building that we are future envisioning, that's, okay, thank you. All right, yep, got it. Okay. And this is just information sharing at this point?
Correct, no action needed. Next building committee, we will be looking for 60% construction document approval for the athletic field, and we'll be getting ready to go out to bid for that work as well.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Gilbane or Left Field on anything that we talked about today?
Can I just real quick, sorry. Just when are we looking for that whole place to get shut down? In other words, the track, because the people will still be using the track in the summer. So when are we looking for that whole place to be shut down? Do we have a timetable on that?
Yeah, I think right now we're tracking August as is going to be a feasible timeframe to shut that down. We will have a month of bidding and interpretation and approvals before they would mobilize.
So what we'll want to do also by the next school building committee meeting is to have plans for Curtis Corner abutter meeting. I know we've been hyper-focused on the abutters at the high school, and the Curtis Corner, I know Justin has been communicating with them, and that's great, but I want to make sure we do have a meeting around that, especially that topic, because they use the property a lot.
Yeah, just put that and be able to put it out. I mean, I know Rex is retiring, but Jeff is taking over, and just to give him time to get that out, the word out that, hey, that place is going to be shut down throughout the community.
Okay.
Did someone?
It's fine, we can talk offline.
All right. That brings us to the end of our business. We have community comment, and we have no community members, so we can move along to our next meeting date and time, which would be Thursday, June 18th, 8 o'clock. All right, and unless anybody has any other comments, questions, or concerns, we can adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So meeting adjourns at 8:59.